Today in episode 60 of the podcast, we will be reviewing the horror comedy The Monkey and the final 5 episodes of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. We'll also be giving the rundown of the top stories of the week, including Amazon getting full creative control over James Bond. I'm Brad, he's Josh, and this is We'll Bring the Popcorn.
As always, before we get started with the news for this week, please don't forget to give us a like and subscription on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you're getting our episodes every single Monday when they drop. If you're listening to us in the audio room, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And also go to willbringthepopcorn.com where you get access to all our archive episodes, all of our social media information, as well as our merch store where you can continue to support the podcast in that way. As always, we can't thank you enough for your continued support.
And so we're going to kick the news off this week with the biggest story of the week, which is that Amazon now has full creative control over James Bond. So there's been a lot that's come out the last few months with Barbara Broccoli and everyone else where they're talking about how Amazon wants to create a cinematic universe around James Bond where they're doing reality TV shows and doing TV and film and doing all this stuff and really against it, really opposed to it. I'm guessing Amazon must have backed up the Brinks truck or something. Like Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson will remain as co-owners of James Bond, but they're not doing anything with it anymore. They said they're moving on to other projects. So something happened where they're just allowing Amazon to have full running control of it, which is kind of sad. You've got, one of the biggest British superheroes. He's basically a superhero in his own way, is now owned and operated by an American company.
Yeah, I mean, you've gotten so many movies over the years. So many different people have played James Bond, so many iconic movies. I know one of my I've really enjoyed the run Daniel Craig had. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people were kind of like up in arms when he got casted, but I think he gave us quite a few really, really good Bond films. Pierce Brosnan had a couple. Obviously Sean Connery, probably the most iconic of all the James Bond actors at this point. But it's going to be interesting to see what direction Amazon does take with it, because you mentioned like the reality shows. I don't know about all of that, like with the spy stuff. That could be interesting, because you've got so many of those like types of reality competition shows that I'm not entirely sure what they want to do with it at this point. But building a whole cinematic universe around it, I don't know what all that's going to entail.
Like, I don't know if James Bond needs a cinematic universe.
Right. Like, they're really good standalone movies. If you want to have world building like they do with Bond every time they get a Bond, like a lot of those movies tend to bleed into each other. And I really think they did a good job of it with Daniel Craig, especially to have like kind of this long overarching story of several Bond films rolling together with a kind of a similar theme and similar like element to it that maybe not as prevalent in the other ones. It felt more like individual standalone films, but this one really like connected itself really well. And if they want to do something like that again, moving forward, I'm all for it. But I don't know, man. It just seems like a buy from Amazon. They were like, hey, we want this property. We see a lot of value in it. We're going to pay an absurd amount of money for it. And it's probably what happened, especially if these people who were so like wanting to hold on to this, like with this iron grip that they've had, that they're just willing to, you're paying for it, so now we're hands off. It had to be a significant chunk of money, and I wonder if we'll ever hear what that cost actually was.
Yes, I mean, they've had control forever. I mean, it's been in this group since the beginning, and now they've turned it all over to Amazon. Like they remain co-owners. They didn't say exactly what
that meant.
That means of what do they still have rights to say, oh, no, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Right.
From the sounds of it, they've given all those rights away, but still own something of the character. So who knows what that means? Maybe it's after 10 years, or if they don't, because there's a few things out there like Marvel has with Universal and Sony. If they don't use the characters and the property after so long, it reverts back to Marvel. So maybe that's something that if they don't end up getting something James Bond, like a James Bond film out in the next 5 years, that the rights would revert back to them. I don't know. Like, we don't know anything about that, but there's also some more talk that Aaron Taylor Johnson, like it was pretty much confirmed at one point that he was going to be the next Bond. They came out saying like nothing was really there. Like it was all the fluff and kind of bad reporting, that he was never really signed or anything was done with him. And, we had Jeff Bezos come out after the deal was done asking who everybody wants to be James Bond, and the Henry Cavill fans flooded him with let's get Henry Cavill. Because they still said if Daniel Craig didn't get Bond, it more than likely was going to go to Henry Cavill there, that they really loved, and it actually surfaced his audition tape for James Bond surfaced as well, and they said they absolutely loved him, but just Daniel Craig just beat him out. So does he do it now? Who knows? He's got so many different projects going on with Warhammer, and he's filming Voltron right now, and he's got a lot of big projects that he's working on. Does he have time at his age and what he has going on now to come back to potentially be Bond?
Yeah, it all depends on what they want to do with Bond, because there's even been talks over the last couple years since Bond, since Daniel Craig has stopped playing James Bond, if they go a different direction with the 007 character to begin with, do they move on to a different who's going to be the next 007? Is it going to be a female character, which is something that's been floated about too? It's interesting to see the direction they wind up going with it, because, there's still several Ian Fleming works that they could adapt into films. There's so many, and there's been 20, 26, 27, 28, I forget the exact number of Bond films at this point, but I think there's over 50 James Bond stories that that have been written. I don't know the exact number, but there's still quite a bit of literary work that they could pull from, and I'd love to get that number. I'm going to look it up after we do the show, obviously, which doesn't help us here, but there's still quite a bit that they could use, and I'm really interested to see who they cast. Do they go younger? Do they go... I know some people were clamoring for Idris Elba as well, but I wonder, at least from an age perspective, if that's feasible. I don't know. Do they go younger? Do they go the youth movement? And if they do, I'm genuinely surprised that it's not Aaron Taylor Johnson, because he's still relatively young and, a really good fit for that.
But does it also change after Craven Bomb? Does that bring his star power down a little bit?
It could, and that's something that they're probably taking into consideration.
I'm going to throw my money behind Beaker from the Muppets. Let's get a Muppet 007.
I can't with you today. I don't know what you're doing.
That would be fun.
That would be wild. But could you imagine him actually talking normal, or just not being Beaker at that point?
Just get Morgan Freeman's voice on Beaker.
Hilarious. But yeah, I don't know who else it could. There's so many people that you could probably name.
I think they could go for an unknown. You really don't know. I mean, do they go for Tom Holland, who's still got Spider-Man and everything, a lot of stuff to do? He's still quite young. He's a
Hardy
big,
was another name
Tom Hardy potentially could go for they potentially could try to go for an unknown, but it also depends. As they've talked about, are they going film and TV? So, or is film and TV going to be two separate Bonds? Or are they going to be the same Bond? Are you going to have a movie, then a series, and then a movie? We don't know exactly how they plan to do this cinematic universe, because it all revolves around about a handful of characters between Q and M and Bond and everybody else. You have a handful of main characters, especially the villains and stuff as well. You have a decent amount of those, but I mean, it's how do you split those up between TV and film if you're trying to run both at the same time? If the TV side is not reality competition and other non-story focused series, and they keep the story to the films.
And that could be the direction they go, but there's so much that we don't know yet. Obviously, This is still fresh news. We don't have all of their detailed plans laid out yet. I'm sure they'll roll out announcements eventually when they sort all that out and work the logistics out. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the future for Bond holds, because Bond, James Bond as a character in film has been around for almost 50 years at this point. It's been a long, long time, to have James Bond in film and other entities. So it's interesting to see the future direction of that character, because he's been around for so long. What's the next evolution going to look like? We all have to kind of, wait and see.
Yeah, and especially with an American giant company like Amazon having control of a British character, are they still going to make sure that they stick to it being British? Do they Americanize it and change him completely? We really don't know, because Amazon has full control. They basically, as far as we understand and know, they can do whatever they want with James Bond now.
Right. Now, who would you think would make for a really good James Bond? Let us know in the YouTube comments. Come to our Discord and talk about it. But I kind of want to move now into another major story that came out this week. So we got some more information about the next Martin Scorsese film. His last one wasn't really received too well. It was really long, and they put it on Netflix, and it was just a really long movie, and it's kind of got a mixed bag, and people are wondering if, he's still got what it takes to make those upper echelon films at the age that he's at. But we got some news coming out this week that he's got some pretty big names attached to his next project. He's not one to ever really shy away from big name actors. I know he works with Leonardo DiCaprio a ton. He's going to be working with Leonardo DiCaprio again on this next film, but he's also got, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, one of the biggest stars in the world, which is huge, and he's also got Emily Blunt attached to this, and if it's going back into kind of Scorsese's bread and butter, which is these, operatic, cinematic crime film dramas that it appears it's going to be set as a mob boss trying to take over the Hawaiian Islands, I believe is kind of what the premise is going to be for that, but I'm really excited that he's got some really big names once again attached to this, and we'll see what happens.
And you got Dwayne playing one of the Hawaiian crime bosses in the movie and stuff, so it was just kind of surprising to see because, Scorsese has talked out against the comic book films and a lot of stuff that basically Dwayne Johnson does, and to hire him in there, I mean, this is probably the most prolific film that he has found himself in. Like, he's trying to do some more serious stuff because he has the UFC movie that he's got coming out where he wore prosthetics, and we've seen some of the set photos from that, and he looked pretty transformed for that, and that's supposed to be a much different serious film. So if it feels like there is an evolution happening to Dwayne Johnson, especially after the fallout with DC and all that he's looking to kind of change up a little bit, and especially as actors get older, they do want to kind of do different things. He's still going to do action and other stuff, but it looks like he's trying to get into drama and seriousness, and to be cast in a Scorsese film alongside a Leo and Emily Blunt is pretty huge for him.
And it seems like there's going to be like a big bidding war over the rights to this movie. Obviously, he put his last film out on Netflix, but most of, if not all of the major contenders are kind of trying to throw their hat in the ring to get the rights to distribute this film. So we don't know if it's going to wind up again being on Netflix, which is crazy given the quality of talent that's in this movie. But it just goes to show what the landscape of film looks like now and moving forward, that, you have these streaming services that are major players in something that would only exclusively go to major studios like Warner Brothers, like, MGM Studios and stuff like that. Like, now you're getting companies like Netflix and Amazon as major players to want to put this on their streaming services. So it's kind of an interesting take to see, like, some of the biggest stars in the world showing up in these streaming service exclusive type films. Obviously, The Rock is not a stranger to that with Red Notice, and Red One being kind of a prime entity that wound up having a short run
Everything
in theaters.
red.
But yeah, he loves all the reds, like all the red stuff. But like, it's interesting to see them becoming a player like that in these, that like they're going away from more of the traditional movie theater, and you kind of wonder what that's going to look like in 5 to 10 years. Like, I know we've talked about it, and like, what's that going to look like at that point? Is it going to be everything's on streaming in the movie theater industry? I don't see it ever completely going away, but if you start getting these bigger films that aren't going to theaters potentially, like, that's huge.
And we'll see if, like, someone like Scorsese stands up and says, okay, well, if Netflix or Amazon, if one of you or win the bidding war on it, because it's going to go to whoever pays the most, we know that. Yeah. Or is there going to be a demand in there that it gets at least a limited theatrical run before it goes on to streaming? We'll see if that ends up happening, because he's had a few now be on streaming. You had in Killers of the Flower Moon that did get a theatrical release for just at least a little bit there and stuff. So we'll see exactly how it happens, because it does sound like it's probably the streamers, especially Netflix and Amazon, have the most money to throw around right now for it. But we'll see if it ends up getting a theatrical release at all. Yeah,
it's crazy to see these guys as major players in the film game too, and just work with these legendary actors, big time, top of the A-list, movie stars that are being a part of these films and going to go through streaming now. Like, it's crazy to think that even just a few years ago that was something that was considered not possible, not probable. But it just goes to show, like, the landscape of, media and everything now, that's a strong possibility that these movies might only get like a 1 or 2 week short theatrical run, and they wind up right on a streaming service. And that's crazy to think about, but may not be the craziest thing if you really think about it, because how many movies have sustained box office success, like in the theater run? Like, you see a lot of people clamor out to go the first 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks of a movie before it completely kind of craters out. It becomes maybe not as worth it. Like, you have a few rare exceptions of these, billion-dollar projects like the MCU movies, which I want to say I could never see not going that route. But so many of these other movies that may only have a 1 or 2 week staying power in the theater to begin with, maybe this makes the most sense for them. Like, you still get your, couple week theater distributorship, but you're going to wind up on a streaming service a lot quicker too. Like, what does that look like financially for these, movies and these film companies and things like that? Like, it might wind up being the smartest business strategy for them in the long run.
Yeah, it's changed so much because it used to be you'd get probably a 2 to 3 month run in theaters, and it would probably be 4 to 6 months before you got it for at home viewing. Yeah. We just had Companion, which you can look back in our archives to see our review of that, and it was well received. Horror comedy overall. It released on demand 18 days after premiered in theaters.
Yeah, it's an incredibly short run for this movie, but that may be the model for these, non-tentpole giant films that may be the market for it now. Like, you have so many of these getting like a short run, and then they wind up in, on these streaming services. I think it was 45 days is what we were seeing for a lot of these, like, overall.
Yeah, I think during COVID we were seeing about 45 to 60 days from theatrical to streaming.
And that may be the norm now. And there may be some exceptions to that, but it seems like we're seeing a lot more of that. And I mean, like I said, this is an interesting case study for the next couple of years to see what that looks like for these films now. Are they going to have that short run, and then within 2 months they're going to be on a streaming service again? That may be the best formula for them going forward, and it's going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, as we've talked about it several times in here already, the streaming services are going through a big fluctuation because they're struggling a little bit. They're constantly raising prices, and streaming is not as profitable as they thought it was going to be based on all the rights they have to pay, of course, for the infrastructure and everything else, that they're losing money on it. But it's also getting to a point where, all right, you're about to price yourself out of it. So it's really going to be an interesting dynamic over the next few years between streaming and theaters to see kind of who's going to win out. With theaters, movies are not running as long as theaters, but streamers are struggling and they're trying to get more content on there. We'll see who ends up winning out. I just hope theaters still will remain around and stuff in there, but it's definitely a changing landscape.
I really hope there's always going to be a place for films to go see it in the theater. In our opinion, there is no better way to experience a movie than to going to a theater and seeing it there on the big screen, in that atmosphere, in that environment, as long as you're not talking during the movie.
Stop it.
We'll say that until the end of time, but yeah, I mean, like, I definitely hope that's always going to be an avenue for films and things like that. Streaming, don't get me wrong, the accessibility for streaming is phenomenal. Never in a million years. Like, if you'd have told us 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we were kids, like, hey, could you have imagined us with the access to every single movie we would ever want to see with just a couple clicks and a couple pushes of a button? You didn't have to go down to the local Blockbuster and rent a movie or two just to watch something new that came out. Or, you could have just instantaneous access to every single movie. Remember when the Disney Vault was a thing? Where they would just temporarily release these classic Disney movies, and you only had a limited amount of time to get it before it goes back in the vault, never to be released again. And now you can find those same movies with 3 clicks on a remote, and you can watch.
Other than when they decide to wipe it off of streaming and hide it forever, and you have no more access to anything, which is the more extreme, harder end of it. Like, at any moment, they could delete any film or any TV show off these streaming services, and it's just gone, and you have no access other than other ways to access it. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy the way it gets. Like you said, yeah, we would have to wait, and we'd have to wait months to get it out for rentals, and then wait to purchase it, and then some stuff would go in the archives, and you wouldn't get into the vault. And now it's everything's there until they decide that they don't want it out there anymore, and then you can't find it anywhere, even on physical. Like, especially they're doing less physical releases now. So the only way you have to watch some of this stuff is on streaming, which is good and bad. Like, you have access to it right away, but there are a lot of films and TV shows I've missed because having a busy life and stuff, even with doing the podcast, but we, have things that we watch week to week that we got to keep up on, and it's hard to include a whole lot of other stuff. Like, there's so many movies that I've wanted to see that I haven't watched because it barely had a theater. If, like, I don't go see it in theaters, it could be quite a while before I watch it.
Yeah, and it's crazy to just see how everything has to work and fit together now, because everybody's lives are so much busier now with work responsibilities, you have family responsibilities on top of that, on top of all of the work stuff that you have to handle. And, you watching this and listening to this, like, go through the exact same thing. And it's just like, how do I find time to watch everything? Fortunately, we have access to so much of that now, but you make a good point of, at the drop of a hat, it could leave your favorite streaming service, and you're only paying for Netflix, and it moves over to Paramount, and you're like, well, I'm not willing to pay for Paramount, so who knows how long it could be before I ever watch that. And that's kind of the wonderful and also like not so wonderful part of having these streaming options is, yeah, you can pay for X number of services, but not everybody can afford every service. So it's just like, what do you make do with what you got? Do you try to watch every single thing that's on Netflix that you could possibly do before you switch over to something else? But what happens if you run out of that and what you switch over to another service winds up moving over? Like it's just a hot mess to try to keep up with everything. But yeah, it's in such a weird flux state right now. It's going to be interesting to see how that continues to evolve in the coming years.
Yeah, like the Willow series, I didn't get a chance to watch it at all because we had so much other stuff going on and watching and busy schedules and stuff. I'm like, all right, I've got time to binge watch it. And then all of a sudden, like, hey, it no longer exists on Disney Plus. You can't watch it anywhere. You can't get on physical. You can't get it any place. I'm like, okay, I guess I just don't get to watch it.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. But keep talking a little bit about, so a property that is got big on Netflix last year, Avatar: The Last Airbender. We got the live action series. Season 2 is filming now. We did get confirmation that another Avatar: The Last Airbender animated series is in the works. It's going to take place after Korra. You're going to have 2 seasons with 26 half-hour episodes, and it's going to follow earthbending twins that are going to become the new Avatar after Korra. The original creators of Avatar are going to be a part of it. So it's really interesting just how, we got Avatar: The Last Airbender. We got the original series, and it was beloved by so many.
Brilliant.
And not a whole lot happened after that. And then we got Korra, and then we got the M. Night Shyamalan movie, and then kind of not a lot happened after that. And then we get the Netflix live action series, and now we've got multiple shows and seasons and other stuff going on. So they're really trying to build that brand back up. And we've joked about it a few times now that the James Cameron Avatar movies are sounding more and more like Avatar: The Last Airbender as well, because they have water, fire, earth, and air tribes that all have something they elements play an importance. You don't have benders, but they play an importance. But when M. Night Shyamalan's movie was coming out, he couldn't use just Avatar because James Cameron had already got the rights to that, so they had to use the full, Avatar: The Last Airbender in there. So it's just been so interesting and weird, the correlation between those two. But I'm looking forward to another series. Like, Korra had its mixed feelings from people just because of some of the subject matter that it touched on, and it did. But I enjoyed it overall. My kids have watched both the Avatar: Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, so I'm really curious to see what they do with the new series here.
Yeah, it's a beloved property. The original, I'll still say it. The original Avatar: The Last Airbender series, for 3 seasons that it ran, was one of the best animated shows to ever be made, in my opinion. It's so freaking good. And we all got excited to watch the live action, adaptation of it as well. Not the M. Night Shyamalan version. We don't talk about that version. That is a terrible film. But, the Netflix series was kind of a mixed bag as far as reception from people that both loved it and like everything else on the internet, you either loved it or you hated it. I wound up getting a lot of enjoyment out of the show. I'm excited to see where they go in the next season. There's talk of it possibly being 3 seasons as well. Go back into our archives and check out how we felt about all of that. But, I'm excited to see where they take the animation series moving forward now with, another Bender story, and see if they can capture some of the magic. I'm excited to see with all of the advancements in animation since even the Korra series wrapped, to where we are with animation now, what that's going to look like visually, because it could be a lot of fun, and also hopefully get that, really strong story element that you got from the original and try to bring that into a new series here. I'm excited to see what they do with it for sure.
Because I believe we're supposed to have another either animated film or series that takes place after Avatar: The Last Airbender, but before Korra, so you can see a little bit more of the adventures before, Ong passed on, and we got the new Avatar with Korra and everything. So they really are churning out a lot, and hopefully the quality stays up. We enjoyed the Netflix, live action season 1. Looking forward to season 2. It was a bit mixed from people on it on what they liked, but we enjoyed it. You can go back in our archives and see what we thought about that as well. But yeah, it's really interesting to see how it felt like such a little show that many people loved and enjoyed, but it didn't feel like it was out there for everybody, and now it's just exploding. The one thing I really hope they could turn around as a video games, like they've turned out a bunch of Avatar: The Last Airbender video games, but they've all been kind of shovelware. Like they've just been really bad, really like terrible controls, either no voice acting or the voice acting's bad. There's hopefully maybe that's somewhere they can give a look at, is getting the video games improved and bringing that side of the Avatar universe back up to par with what the series and everything else has been.
I'd love to see them take that Unreal Engine and apply it to an Avatar game. That would be a lot of fun. Like that's got potential to be really sick, but I'm excited for the future of that. This show sounds really good. It's great to have the original, team having a hand in this series. Don't know exactly in what capacity they're involved with it necessarily yet, but for them to be attached to it as well, you're going to get some of that same love that was in such a beloved animated series, and I'm excited to see what they put out moving forward for sure. So now I want to move us into our movie review of the week. You have The Monkey. So this is the Stephen King short story, kind of adapted into a film here, directed by Osgood Perkins, whose most famous recent work is Longlegs, starring Nicolas Cage. It's definitely a polarizing horror film that got a lot of strong positive reviews, but a lot of really strong negative reviews out of it too, which is kind of surprising. But I know you and I haven't had a chance to discuss really that film because you haven't seen it yet, but this film in particular is definitely it's got an interesting theme to it in the way Osgood Perkins made this film based on the short story. And, I kind of want to start off by saying, Theo James plays, the twins in this film is kind of doing the heavy lifting in this movie really throughout a lot of it. And one thing I could say about this film that I really wasn't expecting was the incorporation of humor into this, because it feels like everything we got from the trailers had it feeling like it was this dark, gruesome, gritty,
more
violent
serious
horror with a serious tone to it. And honestly, I don't think we could have been any further from that in this film with just the absurd, over-the-top ways that they handled a lot of the death scenes.
Wildly over the top. It's just
wild, but they did it in such a way that I found myself laughing in this movie way more than I ever thought I would. The best way I could describe this to people who haven't seen it yet, there was a show, I forget how long ago it's been since it aired, but there was a show on, I want to say it was either MTV or Spike TV, I couldn't remember which network it was on, called 1,000 Ways to Die, in which they came up with all these different creative ways for somebody to meet their death. And it was a very entertaining show. It almost feels like it was that brought into a 90-minute movie where they just had so many different ways that they killed characters in this film that was just crazy, in my opinion. Like, so much death, so much violence, so much gore, but it was all handled with such weird, twisted humor that I found myself never really being scared in this movie, but laughing a lot at the absurdity of all of it.
Yeah, there was really no terror at all in it. It was about the just wildly ridiculous, over-the-top gore. And even like some of the dialogue we were laughing at some of the dialogue was rough. I mean, you don't go into a lot of horror films expecting something deep and serious and good dialogue and good acting and everything with it, but there's some that I face palmed just because the dialogue they had was like, really? Like, that's what they wanted to do with it. But yeah, if you don't really know the story of the monkey, so what we're being told in here is that we have a guy show up to a pawn shop that wants to get rid of this monkey toy that he had picked up. But every time the monkey is wound up, we'll get into that more, it's not always when it gets wound up, as we find out in the movie, that someone dies, and it's the monkey decides who's going to die. So he's playing a drum, he's going to beat on that drum, and when that arm's in the air, someone's about to die, and he's deciding. And once that hand comes down on the drum, at least one person is going to die. And it turns out that, the dad ends up leaving it put away in his closet, and his boys find it. And so everything kicks off when his twin boys, who don't really know their dad because of what happened with all this, that they end up causing all this chaos. And it is wild. Like, the kids insane dialogue between each other. Like there's so much hatred between the two boys and everything, but it was just, I did not expect it to be so wildly over the top. That's why it's kind of still hard for me to process exactly how I felt about it, because it was so ridiculously over the top. Like no one in this movie, and there could be some light spoilers, we're not going to go too deep in everything, but if you don't want to be spoiled at all, as always, go to our wrap up, found that in the description. Then you can see our spoiler-free reviews of it. But like no one in this movie really was fazed by death at all. Like you've got a pastor who's cursing and saying, well, that happens, like all that, and mom telling her boys, yeah, people die. You're going to die. I'm going to die. We're all going to die. Some people are going to die really horribly. Let's go dance.
Yeah, like it's so over the top, so absurd. But at the end of the day, the death scenes in this film are very creative. Like they find very creative, very gruesome ways to kill people in this, and that's kind of the horror thriller element that is in the film, is like the crazy wild ways. Some of it very sudden, and some of it just so absurd. There's one particular cheerleader scene that you and I both I almost fell out of my chair laughing at. It was so absurd, and if you've seen the film, you know the scene that I'm talking about. But there's some really creative ways that they, kill people in this movie. That was, the way my creative brain works is just trying to figure out their thought process on how they were going to set up X, Y, and Z. Because some of them were very straightforward. Mm-hmm. Some of them were just like, how the hell did they think this was going to be, a way to present somebody's death is just absurd and over the top. And some of the ways they described some of the deaths was wild in this film too. It was just at the end, it's really just about this monkey that's terrorizing these two kids throughout their entire lives. So, they have the kids you start out with them young for a little bit of the movie, and then you get to Theo James, who is the grown-up version of the twins, playing, both twins in this, and the whole story that they go through with this. It's just it was such a weird plot throughout this entire movie. Like, it wasn't a difficult plot to follow necessarily, but you could tell they were adapting this from a short story that they were trying to stretch into a 90-minute film. And it was just like, okay, how do we fill in for X, Y, and Z to make this realistic and believable? And it very much felt like that watching it.
And I did allude to this in the last episode, that Disney had a hand in changing some stuff in this film, because the monkey was, in the short story and everything, a clapper monkey, so it's got the symbols and stuff. But after doing Toy Story 3, Disney and Pixar got a copyright on that monkey, on a symbol monkey, so they had to change it to a drum monkey because of Disney, which it worked out fine. I don't think it really mattered that much of what it was, but I just found it funny that Disney had a hand in changing a Stephen King adaptation because they had a copyright on a certain type of toy monkey.
The mouse is everywhere, man. The mouse has got Mouse has got sway and all, and Mouse is jumping into horror too, like crazy. But
as you said, it was insane. Like the story of the adults, like once you get to him as adults, like one of the brothers, how he has a son, but he only sees him once a year because he's trying to keep anybody he cares about him away, because he still fears that even though they've had a lull with the monkey killing people, that he's still afraid something's going to happen. Well, he ends up getting a week to spend with his boy, and of course everything goes haywire at that, and we learn more about what's going on with his other brother's always been a real rebel type of just, I'm going to do whatever I want. He helped kids bully his brother and everything. That we get to see exactly where he is, but we didn't get a whole lot. Like he was at the core of the story, but he had the least kind of to do with the other brother. He's just kind of mystery in the end until we got to the end of the movie, till we got to see more. And the ways they decided to kill people and torture and harm people in this movie was just over the top. We got Tatiana Maslany, who of course they got She-Hulk in the movie, but she plays the mom, Lois, of the kids, but she is used. And so, like we said, after the first death, she's just telling her boys, like, yeah, you're going to die, I'm going to die, we're all going to die. You might die being strangled or something, or you might die in this horrible way. And then, let's go dance. But then There's other stuff that goes on with her. We don't want to spoil fully everything with her, but her character does play a huge part of the film, but she's used very sparingly in the movie.
Yeah, and I'm running out of adjectives to use to describe this film because it was
Quirky, weird, wild.
Yeah, absurd, over the top, funny. If you're into very niche horror, I think this is a film you're going to find a lot of enjoyment out of because it's got a little bit of everything as far as like gruesome deaths, but it's got humor. If you're into like campy type of horror stuff, like it's very violent and unapologetically so, but done in a way that kind of takes the edge off a little bit with the humor mixed into it too. Like, because if you took the humor out of it, it could be a terrifying movie. If you take the humor element and the tone out of it, it becomes a very different movie and a very different story. But I don't think that was obviously that's not what they were going for here. As much of the terror, more of like the campy, over the top. Think of it kind of like, I want to say Shaun of the Dead, kind of dark humor.
Yeah, they kind of take, like, everyone in the movie takes it very seriously, but it is campy and ridiculous and over the top. Like, everyone is playing it pretty straight-laced, but the most wild and ridiculous things happen. Like, and even got Elijah Wood has a little bit of a appearance in here, but he was kind of not needed. Like, there wasn't a whole lot that his character had in the movie. Like, most of it revolved around these boys and the monkey and what was happening. And it didn't give us a whole lot of depth. It gave you a little bit of, all right, this is what happened. We don't know where this thing comes from, but, you know, it chooses at will and at random, and you can't control it. But you just get a hour and 30 minutes of just wild, over-the-top deaths. Some decent humor, but some also parts you're laughing because it's kind of dumb and it's ridiculous, and the dialogue. And yeah, I just found myself looking at everybody like, oh yeah, like 5 people have died. Okay, here's a closet, here's a bathroom. And then boom, someone else dies. And it's like, okay, let's go. It's time to leave. And then there was one, you mentioned the cheerleader. There's a different scene with the cheerleaders where they're cheering like, oh, they're bringing the body out. Woo! And the cheerleading squad is cheering for a body being brought out of a house. Like, it is that ridiculous, over the top. So this movie's not going to be for everybody.
Definitely.
But if you like that niche, over the top, crazy, wild humor, horror that has a lot of gore and violence, you'll have a fun time with it. But if you want more of a psychological or something with a little bit more depth, you're not really going to get it here. You've got to go in for just the absolute ridiculousness that it is.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, it managed to, just the way my brain works and the way I interpret some elements of humor, I just found myself cackling at some of the absurd like stuff that they were doing in this movie, because I was just like, who comes up with stuff like this? Like I said, it's very creative, over the top, funny, silly, obvious, like, oh, come on, really? That's how this is going to happen? Like, and it's just absurd and blunt and to the point in some other case. And I'm just like, what is going on in this? Like, it takes you on a little bit of a mind trip with like some of the very like obvious serious death that in a different situation would be terrible and gruesome and like I said, terrifying, but it's done with such a twist that you're just like, oh, these silly monkey, man, he's finding all these really wild and weird and creative ways. Like, I don't think if they were going for like any of the creepy element of it, they did a very good job of that. But like I said, using the humor and using the tone that they did kind of really offset that in a way that I think kind of charmingly works a little bit in its favor. But the biggest complaint I'll have about this is that's not how the film was marketed. Because I think you and I both went in with the expectations of, okay, this is going to be like a creepy, slightly terrifying, morbid kind of movie, because you can kind of tell from the way they presented it in the trailer that there was going to be some gruesome deaths. And don't get me wrong, there very much are. But they did not adequately, in my opinion, market the tone of the film. And I think that's what's the most jarring for me, because I've had this conversation with a couple people about this that are like, oh, what did you think of this film? And I was like, it didn't meet any expectation that I had for it. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, because like I said, I was going in expecting this dark, serious, like, you think Stephen King, you don't think humor off the top of your brain.
Not most of the time.
Really, not most of the time. And
I mean, Cujo was hysterical, but
Yeah, that's a trigger movie for me. But it tonally was so not what I was expecting that it kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop going into it. Like, oh, this is you, but you could tell that in the first 5 minutes of the movie that it was going to be like that, and you're just like, I think you and I both had that aha moment with that first death. They're like,
yeah, they wasted no time.
This is going to be the type of film that it is. And then you can kind of go on that ride and go on that journey. But you were just like, it threw me for a loop that first 5 minutes. Like, oh, okay, I get it now. But like, had you told me this was going to be out of it, I would have had completely different expectations of this movie going into it. And it may have enhanced my enjoyment of it because of it. It was a surprise I wasn't really expecting. So I didn't know how to like take it after seeing that, because you think you're going on one journey, you're going left at the fork in the road, but now you're going right, and you're just like, okay, we're on a completely other trip that I wasn't expecting in this.
He ain't even got Osgood Perkins put himself in to the film. He has a small, but it's humorous, but it's also, it's a dark, humorous way that he's talking to the kids and everything that happens to him. But he throws himself because he's looking like a Elvis impersonator reject kind of guy, like all that. But it was, Uncle Chip, like it was ridiculous. Like the whole movie, like, and Josh is right on it. Like the previews we got for it did not fully end up matching the tone of the film. Like you didn't get to see any of the crazy ridiculousness that it started. It's looked like a serious horror film and ended up like a Final Destination movie.
Kind of, yeah.
Like it kind of ended up like that. Like you had so many ridiculous over the top deaths. You had a few different cameos that we didn't know a few actors were in the movie and stuff. You get just exploding gore. You get bags full of gore. You get a lot of crazy. So if you don't like gore, but it like I said, it's more the over the top campy humor gore, but it's still very gory. There's a lot of blood, a lot of limbs, a lot of dismemberment and everything else. But it just, it was so different than what the trailer showed it was going to be, because we didn't expect that really corny, dark humor that it had. And like I said, everyone played it very straight-laced, but it was so over the top. Especially you got one kid who's obsessed with the monkey with a long rocker black hair. Like he was so over the top the entire time, and his everything with him was over the top. Like from beginning to end, it was over the top. And I guess it was, that's why it's kind of hard for me to feel how, I had a fun time laughing at it and watching it. And it's a short run. Like it's an hour and 38 minutes or so with credits and everything. It's not a very long watch and stuff, but I just did not expect that type of humor and the over the topness. Like I said, some of the dialogue is really rough, like especially between Theo James and himself, the two brothers as adults. Like some of their dialogue is just like, you couldn't have written or come up with something else. Is that just you leaning into just how ridiculous this movie is, that you just wanted to have a ridiculous conversation between the two? Because I don't want to spoil it. I want people to see it and come talk to us about it. But especially towards the end of the movie, there's one line of dialogue. I know you saw me face palming. Like, really, that was the way that they decided to kind of push this to the conclusion, is with that dialogue.
It's so absurd and over the top. The way my brain works, if you're playing it super straight laced and throwing comedic elements, I will crack every single time, because just the way the dynamics of it and the way it works, it's just like you're playing it very serious, but absurd things are happening all around you, and you still continue to play it serious. I don't know why that's so funny to me, but I was just absurdly laughing at so much of this film. And for that, I think it does a fine job of that. But like I said, going into a movie with certain expectations and getting what I felt was a completely different movie, it was jarring, really, because like I said, I was very much expecting to come in here and talk about this, serious film and how well of a job it does adapting it. Because even if you read The Monkey, like, it can come across as absurd, but it can come across as terrifying too. And I think they chose to present it in a way that obviously was heavily leaning into the humor aspect of it, but it was just, they just didn't do the best job of advertising it that way. And I think that I don't know if that's our fault or if that's their fault, but like when you present it, every trailer you've seen led you thinking you were going to see this serious film, and we didn't get that. And I want to kind of knock it a couple points because of it, just because of my reaction to it, and it kind of that plays a part in your experience of a movie.
Yeah, because that can be a good or
really
bad
does.
thing. Like the marketing and everything leading up to a movie is supposed to get you interested in what's going on. Like you wanted to leave some mystery. You want to be surprised and have stuff that you don't really know about. But when you get a trailer and you go into the movie and it's almost completely different than what you saw, it throws you off because your brain is kind of like, okay, wait, what is going on? Like it's a comedy. Like I was expecting something serious and crazy and not absurd and over the top, and it does kind of affect your mental going into it, unless you just know going into it to turn your brain off and just enjoy the ridiculousness of it, because it was a bit of a twist to that. Because you go back to like some more of the campy, and the one I always go to is Shaun of the Dead, that you kind of got. It has partial serious enough to it. It has serious campy, but it advertised it the way that it had some campiness to it, and it had some semi-serious. Like I said, Shaun of the Dead's not serious. It gets a little more darker towards the end with stuff, but you know, it advertised it exactly what it was. And this one did feel like you're advertising a serious horror movie, and you give us an insanely over-the-top, ridiculous horror movie. It does kind of affect your viewing of it.
Yeah, and it does, and you know, I know people are like that are watching this that are horror fans like we are gonna come at me for like some of the things I've said on this, but of a film like this as opposed to a movie like say a Scream, where you know there's going to be some comedic elements to it, a little bit of a meta take on itself. Like you knew that about that movie going in and seeing it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like they set your expectations for that movie knowing it is, and then by the time you get through one, when they got to Scream 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, like you know what you're getting from those movies, and I don't think they did as effective of a job of setting those expectations in this for me for this movie. So it's just one of those things, like had I known the tone of the film going in, it might have had a different viewing experience. It might have caused me to enjoy the film a little bit more. Not saying I didn't enjoy the movie, because you'll see when we get to our final scores here in a second how I like feel about the film overall. Like it does the horror elements in this film fine. Like it does the gore, it does the violent, it does that very well. It's just the yin and the yang of incorporating the humor into it with the bad dialogue and the way it was done. It was just a weird mixture of things overall that just kind of make it a little bit of a jumbled mess for a 90-minute film. But I don't know. Like I kind of want to get into our rating of this just to kind of put a button on it, because it's just such a mixed bag for me.
Yeah, so in the end, The Monkey was a very mixed type of film. It's a horror comedy. It is ridiculous, insane, absurd, over. I could keep going on describing it in that way, because it was so ridiculous, over the top. It has an extreme amount of blood and gore, but there's really nothing scary about it. It suffers from some bad dialogue and kind of connection between a few of the characters. So overall, I would probably give it a 6.5. Like I had fun with it. I want to revisit it when it's on demand or when it's on streaming, so I can see it with the mindset, knowing going in that it's a over-the-top absurd horror comedy, because I went into it thinking, as you did, that it was going to be a serious horror movie, and that's not what we got. But like if you like the absurd, ridiculous, over-the-top, campy horror comedies, you'll probably get some good enjoyment out of it. But it did kind of throw me off, and that did kind of bring it down a little bit, because I was expecting serious, and we got something completely out of left field.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 myself. And a part of the demerit for that is the terrible marketing of it, the bad dialogue, because I don't think we've harped too much on the dialogue as much as we could have on this. It's bad. It's not good. Like the dialogue in the film is not good at all. Like that really drags down the score of it for me. It does a good job of incorporating the violent and, sort of, twisted elements in horror in there, and I think they do a good enough job of that. Tonally of the film, it is funny. Like I said, I wound up laughing during this movie a lot more than I thought I would, and that's fine, but subverting my expectations by presenting it as a more serious film and giving a completely tonally different film when you actually get it will always demerit a movie in my eyes as far as like giving it a grading, only because like you gotta kind of get your audience in the door somehow, and I think a lot of people are going to feel that way about this movie coming out of it, expecting a little bit more of a serious one and getting that kind of punch in the face right out the gate, like, oh, this isn't that serious at all. Once you put that armor down and go for the ride that is the movie, it's fine and fun and campy and over the top. I'm in the same boat as you, though. I want to go back and watch it with a fresh set of eyes, knowing what the film is now, seeing if I can maybe feel a little bit better about it, like going back and rewatching it again, because I probably will give it another watch when it comes out on streaming. But it really rubbed me the wrong way to, like, when I really sit back and think about it, that I was having that expectation of it being more serious and not being that at all. I'm fine with it at the end of the day, but when you're setting those expectations for a film, I feel like it's misleading to people, and I don't like being misled when it comes. You can hide twists from a trailer, and we talk about not revealing too much of the trailer, but I think they could have done a little bit better job of getting the tone across in a trailer as opposed to giving you everything about the movie in it. And had I think they'd done a little bit better job of that, I could probably have bumped it up to a 7, in my opinion. But for those reasons, I'd drop it back down to a 6 because of those expectations and the way they set us up to think about what this movie was going to be, for giving us something that I feel like was completely different.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the problem with the marketing was that a lot of the absurd humor and over-the-topness revolved around the graphic violence and death, so it's kind of hard to kind of show exactly the dark humor and the absurd humor it has when it's tied to big elements of the film, but also stuff that you can only show in a red band trailer. Like, there's very little of the story in the overall movie that they could show in a regular trailer because so much revolved around those gruesome, over-the-top deaths. And so, yeah, I think that hurt him as well, not being able to really show. But, yeah, it's one that I hope when I review it on streaming, I turn my brain off and go into it. That'll probably have a little bit more fun. It'll probably, in being one that could get like a cult classic status after a while, because it is one of those ridiculous, campy, over the top. It's just, you need to know that beforehand going into it, I think, to get more enjoyment out of it. Because if you go in with the expectation like we did, that it was going to be at least a semi-serious horror film, and you get none of that, then that is going to take you down a little bit. And yeah, we didn't touch on the lines or a lot of stuff, and you mentioned too, with the dialogue was just so rough in this movie. It's almost like a lot of the characters felt like caricatures instead of characters.
Which is kind of a staple in an Osgood Perkins film, really, because when you go see Longlegs, you'll understand what I mean about that. But, you know, it's just, I don't know what else I could say about it at this point. Like I said, the humor is funny. It's very funny, and it made me laugh quite a bit in it. But it's just, I can't get over the expectations and the presenting of the film, which I get. You can't give it all away more than a red band trailer can, but there are ways they probably could have done a little bit better job of getting that point across without showing too much, in my opinion.
A new horror comedy by Osgood Perkins, The Monkey, like.
Yeah, like, let us know there's some easing of the tension there going in, and I think I'd have a little bit different of an experience. I will give one thing marketing did really well for this. It is the popcorn bucket. I know we jokingly talked about, like, you jokingly said we should get it, but it is cool looking. Like, it's the actual monkey, and the drum is the popcorn bucket.
You get a horror movie about a monkey that's killing everybody. Let's put out a popcorn bucket that looks exactly like it and get people buying it.
Really, like, true to life.
$50
cool. Yeah,
too.
It's very expensive. So I was like, no, thank you. But, like, it aesthetically looked pretty cool. Like, if you're a horror fan collector, like, that would probably be a fun one to add to your collection for sure, because it did look really neat. So that's one thing marketing got right, was the popcorn bucket for the film. It looked pretty cool.
After you see this monkey kill everybody, take yours home today. Like,
absolutely. But
and it fits with the dark humor of the movie. Like, all right, let's get you your own. It's kind of the same thing with, like, Child's Play. Like, all right, we've got a killer doll that's killing everybody. All right, let's put out a bunch of Chucky dolls that everyone can play. And we had a family friend that every time I walked in their house as a kid, there was a Chucky doll just staring at you as you walked into the house. It's like, okay, hi, Chucky. Like,
welcome to my home.
Like, that's the doll that's killing everybody. Let's own 3.
Yeah, and let's put it right there when you walk in. You see it first thing walk in the house, let you know you're welcome here.
And that's it's the same vein. Like, it's something that if you pay attention to the movie, you don't want, but because it's not real, you're like, all right, let's get it. But like, no, I would not like a killer monkey popcorn bucket in my home.
Yeah, you don't want that bad juju with you.
Nope. No, keep it away from me.
But yeah, The Monkey is out in theaters right now. Go check it out. Let us know what you think. If you think we completely missed the mark on our review, come to our YouTube comments. Let us know. Come join our Discord. Talk about it with us there. We'd love to hear what you think about it. But yeah, this is one that's, I think, going to be polarizing for a lot of people just because of, like I said, the tonal shift in the film from what we were expecting, the dark, twisted, horror film becoming a lot more campy and over the top. It'd be interesting to see how people, accept that movie and how they feel about it after they've seen it.
Yeah, so heading over into our TV breakdown of the week, we had the final 5 episodes of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man on Disney+. So we took a little break from it last week because we had the Cobra Kai final 5. So now we've got caught up to this is the final episodes of the season, and I think it ended extremely well. There was some twist. It gave you some more details about kind of everybody, left plenty of mystery to go in, but these 5 really kind of settled us in to the end of this season to set up for a really interesting season 2. So, I mean, episode 6 jumped us right into more of the progression of Lonnie, that he's kind of been put on probation in school. He's basically kicked out of school because he's been missing so much. He's kicked off the football team. He's putting everything into the gang. Him and Pearl are having problems because he's not opening up. He still feels like he's doing what he needs to do for his family, but it's also, of course, he's Tombstone, so you're starting to see a little bit of that evolution, but we're also getting quite a bit more with Peter and Nico and Harry, and we're getting the evolution of relationships and everything else here. And I think originally we were going to have 3 episodes and then we would have the final 2 episodes, but I think it worked well for us, at least for me, how I watch it, watching these final 5 all together, because I think it worked together really well. It's going to be one that I'll probably revisit and watch the whole series at one time and see how it feels. I do feel like the animation felt smoother and better as this series has gone on. I wasn't nitpicking or looking at any of the issues, but it was really enjoyable in these final 5 episodes of where we've gone to and all the kind of mysteries that we've unfolded here.
Yeah, because you get some introductions to a lot of characters. You get, your big bad finally comes through in these last 5 episodes of it being Scorpion. Scorpion's kind of that he was kind of coming with the battle with the 1/10 gang and, his rival gang with the Scorpion crew, and you finally get that kind of playing out. You get the introduction of Doc Ock. You get, all of these stories kind of moving forward, like you said, and it's a really fun ride that they take you on. And I really enjoyed knowing how they drop the episodes and the way that the story rolls out, because it does, thematically make the most sense when you break down each of those groupings of episodes, because you leave episode, I'm kind of going to jump around a little bit because there's so much to dive into, but by the end of episode 8, which is where it would have ended in the previous week, you get this battle between Spider-Man and Scorpion, where Scorpion really gets the better of Spider-Man in this, and he has to be taken away on the glider. That if you're a fan of Spider-Man and you're a fan of his foes and the importance of that glider and who winds up ultimately riding this glider, and you know all the story. But I'm really enjoying the journey that they're taking us on here, because you get, like you said, you get these evolutions of the friendships between, Harry and Nico, Harry and Pearl. You get, not Harry and Pearl, you get Peter and Pearl.
Peter and Pearl's relationship really changed and evolved in these last 5.
And then Peter and Harry as well, they want to become, if Spider-Man, it's going to become like his best friend, but it's interesting to see them not really dive fully into that. Like, they're friends, but he's more focused on Nico as his best friend as opposed to Harry. So a little bit of a thing, but I do enjoy the evolution of Nico and Harry's friendship as it kind of evolves in these last few episodes too. But they do a really good job of getting to what is really a very satisfying last 2 episodes, where you're getting this build up of coming back and trying to stop Scorpion from, taking over and, taking out the 1/10 gang. You get some fun stuff to play in, but I really do feel in these last 5 episodes that they've really found their voice and they're really hitting their stride on this show where it's going to take it to some really fun stuff. And I'm really excited to get to the very end of the last episode to kind of talk about some cool things, some little Easter eggs. If you got a little bit of a keen eye and you're paying attention to certain whiteboards of some stuff that could potentially be coming moving forward if they decide to lean heavily into that, and I kind of think that they're going to. So you're going to get some really cool introductions, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my all-time favorite Marvel character,
Chameleon,
finally making an appearance in this show, being voiced by by the actor who is going to play him in the MCU moving forward. Charlie Cox is Daredevil. I cannot talk enough about my love of the Netflix show, and I'm so excited for Daredevil Born Again coming up in a couple weeks. But he does finally make an appearance here in an episode, and a fun little back and forth between him and Peter at one point, and it's just so much fun seeing him in this show more than once, as we come to find out by the end of it. But I'm so happy they included him in on this, and the interaction they had was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to get into a little spoilers here because it kind of talk of the direction where the season ends off is going to leave some spoilers because there's some good twists that happen with this. So again, head to our wrap up if you don't want to be spoiled about anything if you haven't watched all of it yet. But yeah, of course we get Daredevil show up and he kind of starts help unraveling the mystery because he tells Peter that there's something darker and deeper with Norman that he's not seeing, and we do get an evolution of seeing Norman that we're introduced to Thaddeus Ross, who's looking like our old Thaddeus Ross before Harrison Ford and stuff. I didn't look to see who was a voice actor for him this time around, but we get more that Norman is trying to sell it to Thaddeus that he wants to create these new Avengers and stuff, and that he wants to be a part of it, and that he has Spider-Man, and that we can start something new and big with Spider-Man, but it starts unraveling the darker elements of Norman. And what I guess is we know he wasn't going to be true up and on the right path and stuff. We also got a little mystery with Nico that she has some, if you don't know the comics and stuff, you're looking at, she's got some powers that she hasn't told, because a lot of her in the last 5, she's mad at Peter because she ends up, spoiler, learning from Harry, because Harry can't keep a secret that Peter is Spider-Man. And a lot of last few is her coming to the realization of why Peter kept this secret, because they were supposed to be best friends. And I've talked about it a few times. I felt like there was a little relationship that they were poking at, but she kind of puts that to an end, saying that Peter's like a brother to her, and that's why she's so hurt by him keeping secrets. But we find out she's got a pretty big secret of her own that she's keeping from him and is yet to tell him, even though he's poured everything out to her, she's still holding on to that secret.
Yeah, so that's going to be fun to see them dive into in the next season, hopefully, as their relationship and their friendship continues to grow beyond what it is. But they do a fun job of really bringing everything full circle here. So you get the evolution of the 1/10 gang, and you get Lonnie kind of getting deeper into things, and it paying off really well by the end of it. But yeah, man, you get this really intense battle with the 1/10 and the Scorpions. You get Spider-Man involved. He gets his butt kicked pretty badly, and he gets pretty dejected by it. And he has kind of this fun conversation with Norman that's a little bit of a play on a conversation that he had with Ben in the comics, where, instead of the iconic Spider-Man phrase, with great power comes great responsibility, you get, with great power comes respect.
Comes great respect.
Yeah, comes great respect. And if you're not respected, you're not going to become the hero you need to be. And you get this real push of Norman to get Spider-Man to not hold himself back, because he sees this potential that Spider-Man has, and he can tell he's still trying to protect people while trying to stop people. And he's trying to get Peter to lean into more of the, you need to go full on aggressive and show them what you're really capable of, so people have that respect for you, that they're not going to try you kind of thing. Like, really heavy into that, and they do a fun job of playing into that by the end of this season, in the really big battle between the 1/10 and the Scorpion gang, that you get Peter going pretty far before he gets snapped out of it. But I don't want to spoil that part for people that haven't seen it. But you get, you know, just a really fun ride for Peter, just kind of really coming into his own for Spider-Man. And now you get a little bit more of that info of what Norman's trying to work on. You get some insight into some of the projects that he's working on that are a little nefarious, including potentially trying to form his own Spider Legion, as you come to try to find with trying to replicate Spider-Man's DNA and all these other things that you've seen play out in the comics. And some of these characters that you know and have been introduced to are kind of supposed to be a part of that plan. And how's that going to be presented in this TBD? But one of the fun things you get in this, I want to jump ahead into the last episode that kind of puts a button on everything here. You get the culmination of what all of these interns are working on for Norman at Oscorp. So you have this internship that Peter's had the entire season, and you have these 4 different projects that these 4 specially selected scientists have been working on, and they all come to find out that they're building this portal that can jump around to any point in space, almost like a real life, I don't want to say real life, but kind of like a more practical example of like the Space Stone from, and they make mention of, the fact that other beings and elements can do that. And they do kind of tie in some of the MCU stuff, which is fun to see them play with. Like, you talk about the attack on New York, and other beings have means of jumping around throughout space that we don't have. And, you see this, like, it's really cool, like, exposition that Norman gives is like, this is what you've been working on this entire time. So it leads into this really cool appearance from Doctor Strange that kind of ties
really
back
fun
into
twist.
it kind of comes back and plays into the first episode where you see Peter getting bitten by the radioactive spider, and you see the time stone come into play in this that Strange is guarding in this version of the show, and you see how it all ties into the first episode. And I really think they did a really cool full circle moment of, like, okay, we're doing this now, but we're going back in time to affect this, and this is how this showed up. And you get this really cool sequence and a really good battle sequence with the monster that you see in the episode from episode 1, and seeing how it all played about and how it all really tied into everything kind of becoming what it was meant to be, and it always working itself out the way it was intended to, kind of thing. And it did a lot of fun in a really short episode to kind of tie it all together in a way that made a lot of sense.
Yeah, it was a really crazy play on time because, we get Doctor Strange showing up, and Peter's like, hey, you were the guy who showed up at my school and destroyed half of it. Like, I've never seen you before. So we're starting to think, all right, is this one from a multiverse or not? But what we come to find out is like, no, Peter and all of them end up causing what happened in episode 1 in the final episode to happen. So, like, Peter is bitten by a spider that's created from his own DNA that gives him the powers based on the powers he's already got. Like, it's a wild, trippy spin, and we get the symbiote monster that comes through, and we see other symbiote, like the symbiote world and stuff, and we get another interesting twist at the end because, they get everything contained, but course, the tiniest bit of the symbiote is left, but who's the one that finds it? Well, it's Norman. So are we going to get a twist on Venom now with Norman being Venom instead, or is he going to, like, are we going to get a combination of Goblin and Venom? Because they are doing things different. Like, we're getting some different sides and different looks and different ways of these characters so that they're not one-to-one to what we've seen before, which I enjoyed. Like, that's what we said at the very first episode, is that they're changing a lot of stuff. We have race swaps. We have swaps of genders and other stuff on characters. You have in different nationalities of some characters as well. We even got Mary Jane, who's not a part of it, but Pearl is kind of the Mary Jane of the story right now. But you let it play out and see how it goes. And I thought they did a fantastic job. And I'm really looking forward to see, all right, where exactly is this symbiote stuff going with Norman? Like I said, or is it going to be he's Venom, or are we getting a Goblin Venom mashup, or is he going to use somehow they're going to explain that his goblin powers comes from the symbiote or something? Like, there's a really interesting twist they can go with there. And of course, we got Nico's twist that we go with. We've got where we're leaving Lonnie and, everything that happened with him, because he feels like, is he the leader of the gang now after everything that's happened? And, what is Pearl and Peter's relationship? They, at the end, brought so much to the forefront that we've got so much to look forward to in season 2. And I thought they as we talked about with Cobra Kai really sticking the landing, I think they did a really solid job of finishing off this series in a way that we got all these stories wrapped up in part, but we've got so much left open to looking forward to in season 2, because we know it's already going to be at least 3 seasons, and they've set up what looks like a great season 2.
Yeah, there's a lot of meat on the bone to kind of really move these stories forward and see what they do, because you got the Doc Ock element that you also got involved in that too. See how much he's going to play. He's kind of sitting in a jail cell right now. We'll see how long that lasts, but you kind of see him mocking up the infamous octopus arms that, has been synonymous with his villain character as well. You get, the transformation of Lonnie from, the popular athlete to this tombstone character that you start seeing the birth of that character really by the end of this season, where he's friend of Spider-Man, but he's also part of this gang that, could potentially be problematic for their relationship going forward. You get a really cool sequence with him in that battle where he starts to become the actual physical embodiment of what Tombstone is in the comics with some of the powers that he had. Go look those up if you can. And then by the end of this episode, you get, this fallout between Peter and Norman where he's like, I don't trust Oscorp anymore. I can't work for you. But you get Harry now kind of starting his own business venture now with what ultimately becomes known as Web. So if you are a fan of this story in the comics where Harry kind of goes into business for himself, he creates this company Web that's, very Spider-Man centric and forming his own industry as well. But you see he's typing up this email trying to recruit people into his new company. And there's a whole whiteboard list of names on there. And if you go through it, take the time if you really want to know and Google all of the names on it. There's quite a few of them that you do recognize if you're a big enough Spider-Man fan, but there's a lot of Marvel adjacent other character names that pop up in that as well. And one of the cool ones that I think shows up at the very, very end of it is the character that's with Daredevil, and that's Finesse. So you get Finesse showing up. She's one of the names on the board. She's, looking at an email, like, as she's talking to Daredevil. It's something to keep an eye on for their investigation. But you do see Finesse and Daredevil kind of teaming up and working together then, which is really cool because we haven't seen that yet. Like, Finesse is not somebody that's shown up in any of the live action Netflix Daredevil stuff, so I'm wondering if that's going to be incorporated.
Yeah, because she got a brief cameo in one of the earlier, like 6 or 7. She shows up as someone who walks into Oscorp in an area she shouldn't be, and Peter's like, "You don't have access." Oh, okay, and then it's not until the very end we get to find out, like, hey, that's Finesse.
Yeah, and that was a really cool thing, but some really, really fun and exciting names up on that board, and there was one in particular that I don't mind spoiling here because it's got nothing to do with the story moving forward, but it's one of the well-known writers of Spider-Man comics that has a name on that wall that gets a little bit of a love and a shout-out on that, too, which I thought was pretty cool. And if you get the time to kind of screenshot that scene and look up a lot of those names, a lot of exciting and intriguing possibilities of people who may or may not wind up playing a part in this story moving forward. But if they lean on some of these, could make for some exciting storyline possibilities for sure, because there's some really cool characters that show up on that list that are, especially if you're a fan of newer comics, I think you're going to find a lot of enjoyment from this.
And we surprisingly got a few leaks from news sources and the show itself afterwards, because there's some characters that they showed off as going to be in season 2 already. The series just ended, the season just ended, and they're already like, well, you're going to have this, and this is what they look like this, and this is what they look like. Okay, you're already spoiling big time that you have this character coming in and what their role and stuff is going to be. So it's exciting, but it's also, why did they already go ahead and spoil that they were going to? You think that they probably would be, but already spoiling some of their own stuff before the season 2 even begins. We don't have a timeline either on when to expect season 2. We don't know if it's going to be next year. They seem like they're actively working on getting these seasons knocked out and not trying to have too much time in between, but more than likely we see that next year. So
Oh,
we've still got quite a while to go before we would get season 2. So it was kind of surprising to see them spoiler a little bit of who is going to be showing up in season 2.
Yeah, could you imagine next year we get the next season of X-Men 97 and Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man season 2? Just a lot of really cool things that Marvel Animation is currently working on that has had me really excited for what they're doing. I know we got Marvel Zombies coming out later this year. That's going to be one of the next really
Eyes of
big.
Wakanda. And
The Eyes of Wakanda series as well. That's going to be really cool. So really fun properties in work from Marvel Animation. They got some really cool stuff like coming out that we have to look forward to. But I'm excited to see those two potentially next year as well being on the docket. That have me really excited for what they have going forward.
yeah, because we've talked about it a lot that DC has been kind of in control of quality animated stuff while their live action hasn't been as good, and Marvel has been kind of the kings of live action and not as good with animation. But we're seeing, Marvel is putting out some quality animation stuff, and I think people can be a little mixed on What If just because of, the animation style and all the stories it did with there. But it's looked like they're coming into their own with the animation realm here and putting out some quality stuff. But, overall, I did enjoy your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I think it started off a little bit slow and you weren't sure exactly where it was going to go, and it had you kind of nitpicking the animation style. But I feel like it all really did come into its own and get well-rounded and well put together by the end of the season.
Yeah, I think it set up a lot of intriguing possibilities for season 2. It really found its stride in this probably a couple episodes in, once you get a little bit of the exposition out of the way and kind of getting him really started going as Spider-Man, as you see him figuring things out as a teenager here and just kind of really growing up and maturing as he's becoming Spider-Man. So there's a lot of that fun. You get a lot of that charm and the wittiness and the quips that are synonymous with Peter Parker Spider-Man. They do a great job of that in this show, because you get that funny one-liners, like jokey Spider-Man that you really want to see. Well, he's also taking things serious too when he needs to. So you get to see that evolution of Spider-Man being kind of classic Spider-Man, and by the end you get the classic Spider-Man suit finally that we've been waiting to see this entire season. The white and black one was cool. It was neat for what it was, but to get that classic red and blue Spider-Man suit on finally by the end of this was very satisfying as well. So excited to see the direction they move the story in moving forward. If I had to rate this season overall on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm giving it an 8. And I'll say I give it an 8 because, like you said, it took a little bit to get its legs under it, but when it really got going, I've gotten a lot of enjoyment of watching this again. I do plan on going back and watching the entire season again, which is going to give it a higher grade for me. If I want to go back and dedicate more time to watching it, it's going to score higher for me. But I love the direction they're going. There's so much fun stuff to look forward to. If you leave me wanting more, I'm going to give you a favorable review, and this definitely left me wanting more and looking forward to the next couple seasons they have coming out of this.
Yeah, I'll give your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man Season 1 an 8 as well. Like, I think, as we mentioned, it starts off a little bit slow of trying to build and establish the world, and you're wondering where it's going. But once it really, everything starts falling into place and they really start getting into telling the meat of the story, there is a lot of fun to be had. The animation did seem a little rough in the beginning, but we settled in and everything was looking great and moving great at the end, and we got some fun humor. We got some interesting twists and changes again. If you're a purist that only wants a certain storyline of Spider, because we know there's been so many different types of storylines that's been done with Spider-Man, but if you're a purist that I only want this one that I like done in the right way, you're probably not going to enjoy this because you can't enjoy anything. But it's if you can go in and you can really let the changes and the twists develop and you see what they're doing with it, they did a fantastic job with the series, and it did leave me wanting more. We didn't even talk about another twist that happened at the very end. So there's a lot of twists at the end that we find out there's someone still alive that Peter thinks has been long gone and passed, and that's going to add another element to the next season. We won't spoil that if you haven't seen it, but it added a lot for you to look forward to in season 2, and I think they did a solid job overall. The voice cast did well. The changes and the twists that they did to these characters worked for the story that it's telling here. It's not trying to tell the absolute definitive version of Spider-Man. It's telling their version of what they want to tell and what they want to do here, because we still do have a live action Spider-Man in the MCU going on with Tom Holland and stuff. So this is giving us a different look and a different take on Peter Parker and the Spider-Man verse. And I really enjoyed it. I take it as it's kind of MCU adjacent show that's doing its own thing. And I really enjoyed what they did with it.
Yeah, I can't put it in any better words than that. It's just one that, take what you think you know about Spider-Man. There's elements of that in there, and just kind of go for the ride and enjoy it. I think you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of it. If you're not nitpicking every little detail about the story, I think you're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of this series. Some people may have issues with the comic booky style of animation. I personally really dug it. I thought it was really cool. Visually, something that felt almost like a comic book come to life in this, and it scores a lot of huge points with me. I love the animation style.
It just took a few episodes to kind of settle into it.
It really did, and I'm excited to see where they go moving forward. But right now, you can catch all of the episodes of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man on Disney Plus right now. 10 episodes, roughly about 30 minutes each, so it's a pretty easily bingeable show. If you want to take a day and knock it out in about 5 to 6 hours, you can knock it out fairly easily. But that's one that we're very excited to see where they move forward with season 2. And if you watched it and you felt a type of way about it, if you liked it, if you didn't like it, come to our YouTube comments and let us know. Come to our Discord, talk to us about it there. We'd love to talk about this show with you. It's one that we both got a lot of enjoyment out of, and we're both excited to see what season 2 brings.
Yeah, because if you don't come to our Discord and talk with it, it's just me and Josh talking to each other again. And we're just talking.
Yeah, we do that again. Here. So come
talk with us about it. We have fun with just discussing, because we want to see the different opinions. Just like, especially with the monkey, that's going to be a very
polarizing,
varying type of reaction. There's some that may absolutely love and enjoy what they did with it, while we were a little bit more mixed because of what our expectations were going in. But it's fun to talk about and get those differing opinions. Now, if you come in and just say it sucks and this is terrible and horrible, that's not what we're looking for. Conversation, to be able to talk it out. Even if we don't agree in the end, you're having a conversation like, okay, I can see from your point, but I just didn't get that out of it. And we can move on from there. Like, it's having a civilized discussion about something instead of just, oh, this stinks, I don't like it.
Yeah. Come show your work. Like, if you're going to say you didn't enjoy it, say why. If you can tell me specifically what you didn't like about the story, we can have a conversation around that. Don't just be on there like, oh, it sucked, it was terrible. A lot of people that say that probably didn't watch it or didn't pay any attention to it. But if you watch it and say, hey, I didn't like how they incorporated, I didn't like how they did this, I thought they took too many liberties with this, that's fine. And then we'd be lucky to have that conversation with you. We'd love to talk about it. But yeah, don't just come through and say, well, this was terrible. Like, show your work. Back it up with specific reasons. We love having those conversations with people. I love not agreeing with people and not seeing on it when it's done in a way that's not like, playground, fighting over it. Like, just calling people names and saying it's stupid or you're dumb for it. Like, show your work. If you can put it together in words why you didn't like something or why you did, I would love to hear about that from you. Obviously, it's fun if we agreed on it. We could talk about what we loved about it too. But yeah, if you feel differently about that, let us know and we can talk about it. I'm all for it.
Yes, we like seeing those different perspectives. If we enjoyed something you didn't, we'd like to see, we're not trying to change minds or anything. No, we don't want anybody changing others' minds, but it's interesting to see, okay, why you didn't like it if we liked it, or why you liked it when we didn't like it. Like, did you like it for the reasons that we didn't like it? And that's okay.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting conversation to have, because it's two different viewpoints, and you see it, even though we see it as a negative, if you see it as a positive, I'm like, okay, that's awesome that you see it that way. But the discussions, especially about film and TV, because most of it is, even doing as reviewers and everything else, everything does boil down to opinion. How do you feel about a particular genre or actor or director or dialogue or story? Like, all of it, what you want out of your entertainment plays a big hand in your enjoyment of it.
Yeah, it all plays a part about it. And I love people's perspectives on why they like things they do like, why they don't like things they don't like. And when you can have a productive conversation about that, we all learn from each other. And I'm always down to have that conversation with people. So if you you want to let us know how you felt about it, like we said, come to our YouTube comments, come to our Discord, and let us know what you think about it. We'd love to have that conversation with you.
Yeah, so coming up this week, kind of got a lighter week. Last week we had a lot of stuff drop on demand. There's so many things coming out, but this week we mainly have Last Breath coming out in theater. So this is a Woody Harrelson, Simu Liu. It's a deep sea thriller about divers and, one who ends up running out of oxygen. Something happens and they've got to try to do a dramatic rescue. It looks like it's interesting. It doesn't give a whole lot away in the trailer, so it's going to be really interesting to go into that and see exactly what they're able to pull out. Like, I love Woody and I love Simu, to see exactly what they're able to do with this genre that's kind of been done a decent amount, but it's going to see what kind of different take that they can give us on this.
Yeah, and if they present this movie as a dramatic rescue movie and it winds up being an over-the-top comedy, I will flip this table come next week, just because I just went on this rant about marketing. If I laugh at this movie one time, I'm going to flip this table next week, come back and see it.
On demand, we have A Complete Unknown dropping on February 25th. So this is Timothy Chalamet as Bob Dylan, and you can go back on our archives and see what we thought about the film. But it was a fantastic done film that I was actually more surprised by it. Like, I think they did a good job with their marketing, but it was just the performance and really the commitment he gave to Bob Dylan, and just even the supporting cast of everyone, Joan Baez and Johnny Cash and everybody they got in there did such a fantastic job that it was a really fun watch, and that's one actually I'm looking forward to watching again.
Yeah, if you haven't gone and checked that out, if you're a music lover, go out of your way to see this movie. It's really, really well done, and one that we can't recommend enough.
So on the TV side, dropping on this guy's birthday on Wednesday, Survivor Season 48. So we've been watching Survivor since the beginning. One of our teachers from Grant County was on the Survivor Australia with Roger Bingham. I was actually supposed to have his class the year that he went on. So, like, I signed up for the class. I was in it. And, like, well, he's not going to be here to teach this year. Like, why? So I ended up changing classes because it was for the class, but also for him. Yeah. And then it turned out, well, he missed because he was on Survivor. So I've been a fan since the beginning, but it's still running strong. Like, they're on season 48 now, and that's going to be a lot of fun to see what they do with this season.
It's been around forever. It's a show that I bond with my mom over. This is a show that, we'll text each other every week when it's on. We'll watch it in real time together. Some weeks we don't get to watch it as it happens on Wednesday, but we might get to watch it together on Friday. We make sure that we're both watching it at the same time so we can kind of react to it. It's a fun kind of bonding experience, like you said, with our teacher being a part of the show way back when it was at its absolute apex of popularity. Like, it was one of the biggest shows on TV, and the fact that it's still around 48 seasons later, 24 years that show has been on, and it's incredibly popular to this day still. I don't see it slowing down anytime soon, but that's a fun one that drops, like you said, on my birthday. If it's not the first time, it's only maybe the second time that it's ever debuted on my birthday, which is going to be a lot of fun to talk about that with my mom for sure.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Like, me and my wife and our oldest watch it together, and we always, the last 3 seasons, we've kind of started our own game, because I know you do the pool of where you choose who's going to win Survivor stuff. We just do a friendly wager between all of us where it's like, all right, each of us chooses one man and one woman that we think is going to win it all. And I think I got the woman right, I think, once, who won, and I think our oldest picked the winner last season. So it's just been fun to see whose people go the farthest doing that. It just adds a little extra element of watching that show of like, all right, whoa, my person's safe, good, they can move on.
Yeah, it's fun to incorporate that into it. Kind of adds to the viewing experience for sure.
We also have the 97th Academy Awards on March 2nd on ABC. So we got the Oscars coming up, see who's going to end up taking those awards home and seeing if our favorites are going to get there or not. But of course, there's been a little controversy around the Oscars about some of them saying that they don't even watch everything that's out there that they vote on, and they just vote for the friends. So hopefully we see, but there's also, I think this one has been more talked about than a lot recently, because there's some films that a lot of people online have a lot of discourse about that they don't feel the actors, the film itself, any of them should have anything to do with the award season, and they shouldn't be winning. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out and see how the reaction is online.
Yeah, for sure. The Oscars always generate a lot of conversation. We'll see. Good luck to everybody nominated. We'll see if some of our favorite movies who are nominated and have actors involved that were nominated for their roles, if they take home any hardware, it'd be fun to talk about the discourse. Do you think they deserved it? Do you think they didn't? It's always fun to talk about.
And I believe we got Conan O'Brien hosting this year.
I believe so. I believe it is him hosting. So that's gonna be a ton of fun. I love Conan. Conan's great. He's always fun to watch, so that'll be one to check out for sure. Like it always is for film buffs like us to watch and talk about. So that'll be fun watch for next week. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. Like we said, we cannot thank you enough for your continued support. Coming up next week, we will be reviewing the Woody Harrelson Simu Liu film Last Breath, as well as we're going to do a little bit something different. So we've got another week until Daredevil Born Again comes out. We're so excited for that show. But coming up next week, we are going to be talking about kind of our takeaways from the Netflix version of the show, which did run for 3 seasons, to kind of lead into this new season of Daredevil that is going to be under the Disney umbrella now. So we're going to kind of give you a series overview of the show to kind of prep us for what's to come in Daredevil Born Again. Excited to have that conversation. It is one of my favorite shows of all time. So anytime I can come on here and wax poetically about how much I love this show, you're gonna get that in spades next week. So I'm excited to have that conversation. But until then, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you next week.